This video is made for entertainment and educational purposes only. All photographs that are modern in nature are to help describe our story in the video. The photographs are used under the Fair Use Clause of the 1976 Copyright Act. Mammoth Cave was not the tourist destination that it is today. The Kentucky Caves were individually owned by enterprising individuals. Between the years of 1920 and 1941, there was a battle for tourist dollars that included raids and destruction in some parts of the cave system. Called the Kentucky Caves at the time, they would later come under the umbrella of the Mammoth Cave system. However, these 7 show caves would be special in their own right and would start an economic war of epic proportions. They are the Salt Cave, Crystal Cave, Long Cave, Shorts Cave, Colossal Cave, Great Onyx Cave, and the Indian Cave. This was a war of economics and lawsuits, not a battle that was fought with weapons. One man would die trying to find a new cave to make money for his family. This death, along with the lawsuits, would lead to the national park that we have today. Primarily in Edmonson County, the 420 miles of the caves gave some unusual sights to behold. This became tempting for those who owned the land that was above the Kentucky cave system. In 1972, it was discovered that the show caves and the Mammoth Cave proper were part of the same caving system. The Kentucky caves are called solution caves. This happens when rainwater seeps down through the ground and bonds with carbon dioxide that came from the air and dirt. This mixing of chemicals forms a weak carbonic acid. As the water seeps between the crevices in the rocks made from the bedrock limestone, the weak acid begins to wear away at the rock formation. Over the years, these tunnels became larger and larger and eventually to form caves. Because the Kentucky caves form a large system, the name Mammoth Cave was given because of the enormous size of the caves. The Mammoth Cave system is the largest to be found in the world. For thousands of years, Native American people would use the caves. There are many remains of these people who have been found in different caves. Sometime in 1790s, the white pioneers in Kentucky discovered the Kentucky caves. During the War of 1812, the cave was mined for saltpeter near its entrance. The Jefferson Embargo Act of 1807 stopped all foreign trade. This was disastrous for the American military. Saltpeter is one of the main ingredients used for the production of gunpowder. Calcium nitrate, also called saltpeter, began to be mined from the Kentucky caves as the production became more lucrative on an industrial scale. When the war ended, there was no longer a large need for calcium nitrate, and so the businesses were abandoned. In 1816, formal guided tours were given to all those who could reach the caves. It was mostly the rich who could make the trip to the destination to explore the massive cave system. For 125 years, the caves would be broken up between different individual families. Competition for tourist dollars became intense, as many points of interest would pop up along the wagon roadways to attract people to see the caves. Throughout the 1800s, the land would change hands several times. Each time a new owner would take possession of the land. They would have a new clever marketing strategy to employ. Some of these tactics would cause damage to the caves. From cave mummies to houses inside of the caves, no marketing ploy was too fantastic to use. Due to the sensitivity of the photographs and out of respect for the Native American tribes and their people, we have chosen not to use the pictures of Fawn Hoof. These photographs are too graphic in nature for viewing in our humble opinion. As one of the marketing strategies, one of the owners came up with an interesting plan. Gaining access to a mummified Native American from another location in the cave, which was displayed in another part of the caves as Fawn Hoof. The body was found by miners in 1811. The mummy was wrapped in 2 deer skins and a woven woolen blanket. The mummy also had elaborate jewelry and various tools. It was claimed that the mummy was a woman. However, the mummy is estimated to be over 6 feet tall, with short hair and makeup on its lips. Whatever the sex of the mummy, the person must have held a high status to be buried in such a manner. This mummy was passed from collector to collector and fell into disrepair and neglect. Eventually, in 1876, the mummy was transferred to the Smithsonian Institution. One of the saddest parts of the whole conflict is how much damage was inflicted on the Kentucky caves. Tourists were encouraged to break off pieces of the rock formations as souvenirs. Still others were encouraged to smoke in the caves, while other tourists touched the rock formations, which harms the growth of the rocks. As more and more tourists began to flock to the famous Mammoth Cave, the entrance owners got creative. To divert the tourists to their sites, they would put up huge road signs and advertising for their caves. This began to get ugly as people began competing for the same tourists and began to destroy and steal signs. Ticket offices were often burned to the ground to keep people away from the other caves. Sometimes there would be violent attacks upon competing families to keep them from making more money than anyone else. Again, no idea or ploy was overlooked when it came to the competition for the almighty tourist dollar. There were some enterprising folks that decided to throw up road signs to misdirect people to come to their personal entrance to the Kentucky caves. They would throw up roadblocks or would have people dress up as police officers. They were called cappers, to direct people to their caves. Such excuses for these road signs included road closures due to floodwater, cave-ins, or other excuses. These cappers would also sabotage each other's road signs. The officers would then offer tickets to be sold to alternative entrances to the caves. Many people were fooled into thinking these dressed-up people were either traffic cops or police officers. This became such a huge problem that the businesses would put up signs along the road which read, quote, "Do not be confused. No one has the right to stop you on this road," unquote. One of the saddest ploys in the Kentucky Caves history record would be the cottages that were built. These cottages were built to help those that were suffering from consumption, TB, and other lung diseases. In 1839, Dr. John Crugan of Louisville, Kentucky, was diagnosed with TB. To help find a cure for this fatal disease, Dr. Coogan purchased part of the Kentucky Caves for $10,000. He had cottages built for those who would come to the caves for restorative properties. 16 patients would go under the care of Dr. Coogan in hopes of a cure. This idea did not work as the damp cave conditions worsened their symptoms, and all of those who came for help would die of the disease. There were several people that decided to use clever names for the entrances to attract tourists. Such names as Salt Cave and Colossal Cave were among the most popular. Other businesses named their caves Onyx Cave and Diamond Cave, or just stole the name Mammoth Cave to add to their name. Such examples are Morrison's new entrance to Mammoth Cave or Mammoth Onyx Cave. There was also the Great Crystal Cave. By 1920, the competition for the Kentucky caves had grown to epic proportions. There were constant hunts for new caves for exploitation. This became the fatal mixture that led to the only death of this war. The Collins family owned the entrance to the Great Crystal Cave. Because this cave was off the main road, and due to all of the Ploys from the other families, the Great Crystal Cave was not visited very often. 38-year-old William Floyd Collins decided that he was going to go cave exploring for a better cave for his family to make money. Collins had left word with his family on where he was going to go and what he was about to attempt. Taking a lantern and a rope, Collins entered a hole that was just big enough for his body. He wiggled his way for several feet down a chute until he came to a large cave. He explored the room until his lantern began to flicker. He then began to climb his way back into the hole and wiggle his way back up in which he had just come out. Just as he was about to reach the top of the small hole, Floyd Collins had become stuck in the chute. A small rock had dislodged and wedged Collins' body inside of the chute with him unable to move. The more Collins tried to move from his position, the more rocks and dirt began to fill the space around him. Collins could not see the exit as the chute had several sharp zigzag turns. When Collins did not show up later that evening, the concerned family began to hunt for him. The next day he was found by the sound of his screams for help. The smallest of the party crawled into the cave to assess the situation. It looked hopeless. The first attempts at rescue failed. Within 48 hours of the predicament that Collins was now in, now made national headlines across the United States. Within 10 days, the National Guard had to be called in because of the media circus and vendors selling wares to thousands of people who came for the spectacle. Because the chute was so fragile, the lieutenant governor, 13 days later, ordered and supervised the hand drilling of a rescue shaft. While the shaft was being drilled, Skeets Miller, Floyd's brothers, and other small cavers all made several trips into the small chute to try to help keep Floyd alive. On the fourth day, a small cave-in happened and a rock collapsed the entrance to the passageway. The men were able to keep voice contact with Floyd during that time. For 2 weeks, Floyd was stuck in that chute. The miners finally reached Floyd Collins on day 16. Unfortunately, it was too late. Collins had died before the rescue. His death happened 3 days before they reached him. He died of exposure through hypothermia, thirst, and hunger. It took a further 2 months to recover his body. The grieving Collins family sold the Great Crystal Cave to another person. This person was not one to let a tragedy go to waste. So they took the body of Floyd Collins and displayed it in the cave inside of a glass coffin. His body was stolen on the night of March 18th through 19th, 1929. It was later recovered with a leg missing. The remains were kept in the cave in a chained casket after that point. After Mammoth Cave took ownership of the cave, the family requested for the burial of Floyd. This was granted. Floyd is now interred at the Cave Baptist Church Cemetery on Mammoth Cave Park grounds. His tombstone reads, quote, "Greatest cave explorer ever known," unquote. Because of the intense actions of the people who were trying to cash in on the Kentucky caves, there came a movement to make a national park. In 1924, the Mammoth Cave National Park Association was established. Authorization for the park was approved on May 25, 1926. Using donated funds, the association began to buy farmlands around the Kentucky caves. However, this did cause some legal issues. The death of Collins only added to this movement, as it is thought that the national park and consolidating the caves would stop any further deaths related to the conflict. The federal government was prohibited from restoring or developing any land that was held by the Mammoth Cave National Park Association because it was a private entity. The Evening Star reports on March 24, 1929, that the heirs of the original owner of the property asked for funds as the Mammoth Cave Park plans were advancing. The heirs were from the John Coogan estate. This suit was filed with the District of Columbia Supreme Court. It was to stop the Mammoth Cave Trust estate from permitting the Mammoth Cave National Park Association from taking the property without paying for it. The heirs were not opposed to the park, but requested fair compensation for the land that was on the block to be taken by the Mammoth Cave Trust estate. The private Mammoth Cave became a national park in 1941. However, this did not immediately end the war or set up a truce among the families. It took several decades for many of the businesses to close doors or to become incorporated into the Mammoth Cave Park. By 1960, the remaining businesses felt that they needed to cooperate and cross-promote the caves. The information booths and cappers began to disappear from sight as more and more cooperation ensued. In 1972, Mammoth Cave united with the Flint Ridge System to become the official name of the Mammoth Flint Ridge Cave System. The national park became a World Heritage Site on October 27, 1981. The park went on to become an International Biosphere Reserve on September 26, 1990. And finally, an International Dark Sky Park on October 28, 2021. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living want to thank you for watching and reading our articles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we bring you the history of the Appalachian Mountains.